Coming up, Zelenskyy is in Washington, D.C. to meet with U.S. politicians in his efforts to ramp up support for Ukraine. President Biden is promising additional funds and weapon supplies to Ukraine. South Korea continues to see snow and freezing weather. Parts of the country could see up to 30 centimeters of snow in 2 days. Plus, a parliamentary probe into the Itaewon tragedy was done on site on Wednesday. Bipartisan lawmakers in the special committee saw the alleyway themselves. This comes as the two parties are seeking to strike a deal for next year's budget by Friday. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We start out with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who is currently in Washington, D.C., the first time he has left Ukrainian soil since the war broke out. So far, he's met with U.S. President Joe Biden, while Washington has also unveiled new military aid amid Zelenskyy's visit. Our Itaewon starts us off this morning.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is now in Washington, D.C. He arrived at the White House on Wednesday local time shortly after 2 p.m. to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden. This is Zelenskyy's first known trip outside Ukraine in the 300 days since Russia started its invasion. The two world leaders began their meeting in the Oval Office at around 2:30 p.m. Biden warmly welcomed the Ukrainian president, saying he's honored to be at Zelenskyy's side.
Together with our partners, we're also going to continue to impose costs on the Kremlin, and we'll support Ukraine pursuing a just peace. President Zelenskyy, the United States stands with the brave people of Ukraine. We stand with you. You've been a great leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Of course, thanks my partisan support, thanks Congress, and thanks from our just ordinary people to your ordinary people, Americans.
Shortly before Zelenskyy arrived, the U.S. State Department unveiled a new round of military aid for Ukraine worth $1.85 billion. This brings the total military aid that Washington has sent to Kyiv to almost $22 billion. The new package includes a Patriot missile battery, a sophisticated air defense system that can repel Russian missiles and aircraft. Biden said that the U.S. will continue to strengthen Ukraine's ability to defend itself, particularly its air defense, amid Russia's strikes against critical Ukrainian infrastructure as winter sets in. Russian forces last week launched one of the largest bombardments of the capital, Kyiv, since the war began. Meanwhile, in the joint press conference, Biden noted the two countries have been in close communication throughout the hardship, saying it's particularly meaningful to look each other in the eye in person for the first time since Russia's invasion. Zelenskyy also said that every dollar of investment for Washington is going to strengthen global security. After his White House visit, the Ukrainian leader will be heading to Capitol Hill, where he will address a joint meeting of Congress. Itaewon, Arirang News.
President Xi Jinping met with former Russian president and current security chief Dmitry Medvedev. During Wednesday's session held in Beijing, both emphasized that peace talks are needed for the war in Ukraine. Xi said that China hopes all parties will maintain restraint and resolve security concerns through political means. Bilateral cooperation was also on the agenda. Both agreed to strengthen strategic partnerships, including the economy and industrial production. Seoul and Washington will develop realistic training scenarios based on possible nuclear missile threats from North Korea. The allies will also expand the scale of field drills next year. Our Kim Da-mi provides a glimpse of what to expect.
South Korea and the United States will put together realistic training scenarios to handle North Korea's evolving nuclear and missile threats. The two allies also plan to carry out around 20 combined training programs in the first half of next year, including the Sangyeong amphibious exercise, which was suspended in 2019 as part of efforts to improve inter-Korean ties. All drills will be conducted at the same level as the full Eagle Field training, which is one of the largest military exercises conducted annually in the world. The plans were announced on Wednesday following a meeting of Seoul's top commanders, presided over by the defense minister, to discuss policy plans and priorities at a time when the North is persistently pursuing its missile and nuclear ambitions. while underlining hard Washington cooperation against Pyongyang's threats based on the U.S. extended deterrence commitment. He stressed the need for the South Korean military to be taking a leading role.
To ensure that we can respond firmly and perfectly to any North Korean provocations, I particularly emphasize the maintenance of a posture to respond immediately on the ground for a definite win in any form of combat.
Plus, a new Joint Chief of Staff division will be launched in the new year that'll be in charge of dealing with threats from the regime's nuclear weapons and mass destruction. Wednesday's agenda further included the ministry's push for the Defense Innovation 4.0 initiative aimed at harnessing AI systems utilizing both manned and unmanned platforms to boost security capabilities in outer space, cyberspace, and other domains. 김다미, Arirang News.
South Korea continues to deal with the freezing temperature, with cold wave warnings issued throughout the central parts of the country, including the capital region. People commuting to work, especially in capital, had to wrap themselves up as the mercury dropped to nearly minus 10 degrees Celsius in the early morning. But it won't be getting much milder, as minus 6 degrees is expected to be the day's high. The country's west coast is seeing heavy snowfall, and Chungcheongdo provinces as well as the Jeollado provinces are all expecting snow of more than 30 centimeters until Saturday. It will be slippery after the snow, and there will be freezing temperatures, so be sure to be careful outside. South Korea's finance minister says the country faces a complex crisis. As the global economy slows down, the Yoon administration set the direction of its economic policies for 2023 designed to overcome the challenges and boost growth. Our Ji-young has the details.
The growth of the South Korean economy is likely to slow down next year, particularly in the first half. Economic growth forecast for next year is 1.6%, down from 2.5% this year. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho on Wednesday unveiled the economic policy directions for next year, aiming to overcome the low growth and lay the foundations for a rebound.
We will push for economic policies that focus on a stable macroeconomy, recovering people's livelihoods, boosting the private sector, and laying the foundation for the future.
To help boost the economy, the government is planning to spend 65% of next year's budget in the first 6 months. Chu pinpointed stabilizing inflation and people's livelihoods as the top priorities. In terms of people's living expenses, the government is extending its temporary fuel tax cut until the end of April next year. But as gasoline prices are beginning to settle down, the government said it'll reduce the tax cuts to 25%. The government will also work to improve financial soundness of state-owned companies, particularly those in utilities that have sustained heavy losses amid high fuel costs.
To save energy and improve the financial solvency of state-run power utility companies, the government will gradually raise gas and electricity prices, with the goal of writing off their accumulated deficits by 2026.
Chu also said the government is aiming for a soft landing to prevent the country's real estate market from excessive contraction, as surging borrowing costs are scaring buyers away. To avoid a sudden freeze of the real estate market and boost the number of houses up for sale, acquisition tax will be eased for multiple homeowners. Also, a major issue is South Korea's weakening exports amid a worsening situation abroad, and Chu said the government will do all it can to support the country's exports and win deals overseas in 5 major areas, including semiconductors and nuclear power plants. The government has also established a new strategy called New Growth 4.0, centered on future industries, by promoting key projects in 3 big areas, including future high-tech fields, digital transformation, and strategic industries. Economic policies will also be geared towards expanding parental leave from the current 1 year to 18 months and providing substitute holidays for Buddha's birthday and Christmas. Ji-young, Arirang News.
For the first time, South Korea's total spending on R&D surpassed 100 trillion won, or roughly $78 billion at the current exchange rate. data by the Science Ministry shows 102 trillion won for 2021. That's up 9.7% on year. The country ranked second in terms of related expenditure as a proportion of GDP at 4.96%. Israel topped that list. Seoul's R&D investments were mostly led by the private sector, as investments from such companies and overseas accounted for over 76%. A month and a half has passed since the deadly Itaewon crowd crush. A special parliamentary committee began on-site inspections to find out the exact cause and who is responsible. Our Lee Kyung-eun has the details.
The parliamentary probe into the deadly Itaewon crowd crush kicked off on Wednesday at the very site in central Seoul where 158 people died while celebrating Halloween. The National Assembly's Special Committee first paid their respects to the victims at the memorial altar and vowed to give their utmost efforts.
We will do our best with this probe to find out who was responsible for the accident and to set up prevention measures.
네, 약속 잘 지켜주세요. 최선을 다해주세요.
The families of the victims waited for more than a month for the probe to start, delayed by the political parties' dispute over next year's budget and the motion to dismiss the interior minister.
It's been a month and a half, and you show up now to finally start an investigation. This is not about your parties. It's about the young lives that have been lost.
The primary target of the on-site inspection was the steep, narrow alleyway, where the committee asked local fire and police authorities why they failed to take adequate prevention and response measures.
There were so many more people this year at Halloween compared to last year, and the crowd was piling up toward the end of the alley.
The committee later inspected Itaewon Police Station, the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency, and the city government. A second round of on-site inspections is set for Friday, covering higher organizations like the Ministry of the Interior and Safety. The non-legally binding parliamentary probe will also include briefings by organizations subject to the investigation, including those in charge of national crisis management at the presidential office. Then parliamentary hearings with key figures, which have not yet been decided by the rival parties. The 45 days allotted for the probe are already halfway through because the counting began while the probe was still being prepared, and the rival parties initially agreed to kick off the actual investigation only after they passed next year's budget. Negotiations on that are still ongoing, with the parties seeking to strike a deal by the plenary session on Friday. In case of no deal, the National Assembly Speaker says either the government's original budget plan or the opposition bloc's revised version will be put up for a vote. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
South Korean culture content had a big year in 2022, continuing the winning streak of the past few years. But while certain industries get a lot of spotlight, others that deserve more attention are overlooked at times when it comes to recognizing the big players in Korean content exports. So to discuss this more, we have Professor Kenneth Kim from the Department of Culture Content at Hanyang University. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on this freezing day.
Hello, it's good to be here.
Now, South Korea's biggest content exporter this year was the gaming industry. What are some strengths in the Korean gaming market? It doesn't get that much media attention, and compared to last year, how did the gaming industry do this year?
Yes, gaming industry has been the biggest contributor in the content business export. According to Korea Creative Content Agency, during the first half of this year, game industry increased 4%, while the export decreased 1.4% compared to last year. But the total amount was over $3.65 billion, and it's 66.5% of entire content industry export. This is bigger than music, broadcasting, and film industry combined. Game was considered child's play and did not gain much attention from the media. But the game export outperformed battery and appliance industries in the global market during year 2020. Some believe that games should be considered as a major export industry along with semiconductors and cars. Some of the strengths of K-game is the expansion of content IP. Game itself may be important, but many of the companies are also focusing the effort to finding and utilizing the use of the IPs. These IPs extend beyond games and reaches the fans of webtoon, web novel, and animation. One of the industry leaders, Nexon, invested $500 million at AGBO, one of the recognized studios in Hollywood, which participated in the production of Avengers. As you can see, some of the Korean game companies are trying to become the leaders in global entertainment market as well.
Right. Now, I want to talk about the movies now. South Korea's movies saw huge growth in the first half of this year. What was behind this? And I had another question. Are Netflix series such as Squid Game and Suriname considered as South Korean exports as well?
Yes, Korea movie had revenue growth of 58% and export increase of 51.8% from last year. The growth came mostly from ease of COVID-19 restriction, leading to increase in box office. But it is still far lower than that of prior to COVID-19. Film including Roundup and Part 2, the other one, also contributed to the growth. Roundup's ticket reservation was the highest since the film Parasite in 2019. Roundup also premiered in 8 countries, including the US and Canada. Netflix series such as Squid Game and Suriname could be considered export since it reaches the viewers around the world, but it would not be included in this stat. The contents were sold to the platform, and the platform delivered the content to the global regions. Also, some of these OTT contents will be included in the broadcasting industry result, not film.
Right, and we all know this. Music has always played a big part in content exports. How do you see the industry faring next year with BTS members joining the military?
Yes, music industry performance has been very strong with 31.7% revenue growth and 26.2% export growth during first half of this year. Idol groups debut since 2017 are considered fourth generation K-pop idols, and they have successfully entered the global music market. K-pop concerts are increasing as some of the countries are reaching the end of pandemic. With BTS member Jin joining the military, HYBE may not grow as fast as it used to next year. But HYBE's fourth generation groups are performing well, and it has the most number of fifth generation idols debuting next year. One of the idols may debut through future programs at CJENM. Wever's profit model may also support the growth of the company. HYBE started the subscription model with Group Nugent this month, and Weverse will also start the subscription model early next year. Analysts predict that 4 entertainment companies combined revenue will grow to 12%, while operating income will grow 70% next year. We will definitely see more active idol growth locally and globally next year.
Right, and we do have, South Korea does have strong lineup in the music industry, apart from BTS, and new business models are coming up in the next year. So we're all looking forward to it. Thank you so much for your insights this morning. I hope you have a great day, Professor.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
For a look at news from around the world, we turn to our Lee Seung-jae standing by at the Arirang News Center. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Now let's start off with the World Health Organization, which has expressed concerns over China's recent surge in COVID-19 infections. What's the latest?
Sure. Now, the head of the World Health Organization said on Wednesday that there are concerns over a spike in COVID-19 infections in China. Now, the WHO is trying to help the government focus its efforts on vaccinating people at the highest risk across the country. Now, according to Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the organization is very concerned over the evolving situation in China, with increasing reports of severe disease. Now, Tedros added that the agency needed more detailed information on disease severity, hospital admissions, and intensive care unit requirements for a comprehensive assessment of the situation. Now, infections have spiked after China lifted its zero-COVID policy earlier this month, with some projections showing the country could face an explosion of cases and more than 1 million deaths this next year. Now over to the UK this time, where thousands of ambulance workers in England and Wales walked out over pay on Wednesday, continuing to put a strain on the state-funded health service. Those taking part in the strike include paramedics and call handlers. The 24-hour strike targets the workers' concerns over real-term salary cuts, as they've expressed frustration over the government's lack of will to negotiate. An independent pay review body had previously offered a 4% increase in pay for ambulance workers. However, unions are seeking above the current rate of inflation, which stands above 10%. Now, the strike also comes a day after nurses walked out over pay. Now over to Peru this time, where citizens took to the streets of Lima on Wednesday to demand peace in the country amid violent protests that left 24 people dead after former President Pedro Castillo was ousted. The demonstration involved people from different religious and social organizations as they sought peace in the country. Now, human rights groups have accused Peruvian authorities of using firearms against protesters and dropping smoke bombs from helicopters. Now, the army says protesters have been using weapons and homemade explosives, leading to more violence. Now, on a more festive note, Santa seems to be taking a short break from all the Christmas preparations on Wednesday, as a Rio de Janeiro aquarium had Santa swimming around fish and sharks. Dressed in red with a long beard, white beard, long flippers, and a diving cylinder on his back, Santa swam in the Aqua Rio's fish tank. Marking the holiday season, Scuba Santa will dive daily until Christmas Day.
Good morning. Well, haven't we had already enough of this freezing weather this winter? A stronger cold front has moved in today on the day of the winter solstice, and it feels like it is below -10 degrees Celsius again here in the capital. And it looks like it's going to be much colder tomorrow. And it's even rougher for those on the west coast, with heavy snow alerts issued in Chungcheongdo, Jeollado, and Jeju Island this morning. Jeju and Jeollado provinces could see up to 30 centimeters of heavy snowfall, while the rest of the west coast could see up to 25 centimeters. Wet roads, especially alleys and sidewalks, have turned icy this morning, so please be extra careful today. Afternoon highs will be 5 to 8 degrees lower, Seoul topping out at -6 degrees Celsius, which is 9 degrees lower than yesterday, while Daegu tops out at the freezing mark. Now, tomorrow's cold snap lingers into Christmas Eve, so please do bundle up for your Christmas weekend. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day, and Arirang will be back tomorrow for our Friday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening, wherever you are, and take care.
오지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손자